The most thrilling, spine-tingling series ever.
From the pages of R.L. Stine's best-selling books,
And the screams go on forever and ever.
We now return to Goosebumps.
Greetings, Goosebumps fans, young and old, big and small, living dead and undead. Welcome back to the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Isaiah Vargas. I'm joined by my good buddies Bjorn Palnick and Nick Shaw. We are the Goosebumps Crew, and we're back to, what else? Talk some Goosebumps. If this is your first time joining us here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, I want to sincerely welcome you all. If you are or have ever been a fan of the popular Goosebumps series of books or the monster franchise those books spawned, I have a feeling this podcast is going to be right up your alley because, as I always say, me, Bjorn, and Nick are some of the biggest Goosebumps nerds on the entire planet, and we could talk about Goosebumps for hours on end, and that's exactly what we do here on this podcast. Every week we got a brand new episode talking about everything Goosebumps, whether it be the books, TV shows, movies, video games, merchandise, whatever it is that has Goosebumps in the name. We're going to talk about it so much that we're going to give you goosebumps. So with all that said, if you end up liking today's episode, make sure you leave a like and comment. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that bell notification so when new episodes go up every Wednesday at noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, you can get a nice little notification to go watch it. But if you're just dying to get those episodes early, trust me, I know the feeling. You can catch them over on our audio platforms. We're streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can follow us over on social media. We're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, just to name a few. You can also follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps Aussie Fan and Sean, respectively, and their social medias and their YouTubes. All those links are in the description below, so check them out. Join the Goosebumps crew today and become a crew member. We appreciate you in advance for your support. Now, we are officially back talking about the Goosebumps TV show because we love that TV show. We talk about it probably... It's our most talked about topic here on the Goosebumps Crew Podcast. And today, however, we've done interviews talking with actors, directors, and writers. But today we're diving into another aspect of TV shows, and that is the music that's within them. Because TV shows would be nothing if they didn't have the amazing scores, music, and of course theme songs. And when it comes to Goosebumps, it has an incredibly iconic theme song. So what better way to talk about this topic than by bringing on the man who brought us this incredible music, Mr. Jack Lenz. He is a Canadian composer who's done just about all the work on the Goosebumps TV show. Jack, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Goosebumps Crew.
Thank you so much, guys. What a pleasure, and I really appreciate an opportunity to chat about the music for the show, and I love your enthusiasm for it.
Oh, thank you.
I always say it was a great decade, the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we agree that lots of it is coming back.
Definitely. Yep. We are, as I've said for a while, I feel like the 2020s are the year of 90s nostalgia. That's when it's really kicking into full force. So with that, Goosebumps is making a big return too. And especially the 90s show. Everybody knows about the Goosebumps 90s show. Some people even know it more than the books because, people love their TV shows and can be exposed to that more than reading, at least for me. But when it comes to the Goosebumps 90s show, there's just like any other television show, you got to have talented people that are making the background music that goes into these episodes. And especially when you're creating a horror show, you need to have a lot of focus on creating something that adds to the tense and spooky atmosphere. And that's why we're very excited to talk about that today, because you've done tons of work on this show, including, of course, that very, very popular theme song. But before we get into Goosebumps, we want to learn a little more about you, Jack Lenz, the person. So my very first question is, you've been a composer for basically all your career. But how did your career begin? Where did you start?
Well, and that's, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to do this. And I've always been one of those people that, especially when you write music for shows, you're really behind the scenes. No different than the people who make, the scary monsters. No different than the people who actually end up editing it and doing the sound effects. It's sort of one aspect of it. But my early life in music started in a province called Saskatchewan, which is in the middle of Canada, and probably one of the prairie provinces, very flat, but it produced artists like Joni Mitchell and Neil Young, the people who were inspired by the vast landscape and the vast horizons. And the joke is if your dog ran away, you could watch him for 3 days. That's how flat it was, and it was that flat.
Wow,
it was crazy. So I grew up playing piano. Was encouraged by my mom mostly to learn to play piano, and I was the only one of the 5 kids that actually took it seriously and practiced. But when I was in my teens, I started playing in bands, and the bands were local bands in Saskatoon, which was a small city in Saskatchewan. And Saskatoon, Saskatchewan has been used in all kinds of ways through cinematic history as what would be the best way to describe it? Sometimes as an incantation to bring on an eclipse in a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court. Mm-hmm. And sometimes as a way of saying, well, if you're from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, you can't possibly speak English. That doesn't even sound English. Mm-hmm. So but playing in bands was a blast as a kid. I was 15 when I started playing in bands, and then I got a really lucky break in my early 20s. I got a job with a group called Seals and Crofts. It was a musical folk duo in Los Angeles, and I'd met them doing some touring in Canada, and then sort of asked them for a job because a band that I'd been working with broke up, and I spent several years touring with them and recording with them, and that was really my first real introduction to pop music. They had a big hit called Summer Breeze. Diamond Girl.
Summer Breeze.
Yeah, we may never pass this way again. Great writer named Jimmy Seals, and great singers. And then I went on from there to work with Kenny Loggins, who wrote all the 1980s big movie hits like Danger Zone and Footloose and Theme from Caddyshack. And I worked with him and Jimmy Messina in a band after that. And I lived in LA for many years and sort of got my feet wet in my 20s in terms of becoming a songwriter. But I'd always been interested in scoring, and I'd always loved music and films. And I remember walking out of films even as a kid thinking, wow, that music is such a powerful thing, and stories are such a powerful thing. They can actually make you feel like you can accomplish something. You can actually do something, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got the bug early. And after my time in LA, I came back to Canada, and I got hired as a director for a late night music, like 5 nights a week, doing an hour and a half live television every night, as a musical director and pianist and band leader. And then I started writing music for news shows. I spent quite a bit of time writing music for news shows. And then I realized that I really wanted to get into what's called long form scoring. But through that time, I'd had opportunities to work on, with some significant artists in Canada. I worked with an artist named Anne Murray, who was a very successful singer globally. I did recordings with her. I worked with a lot of people out of Nashville. I kind of kept my U.S. connections, but I didn't really live in the U.S. anymore. I lived in Toronto when I came back at the end of the 70s. So I kind of went through this thing of trying to figure out, how could I make a living because I could make a very good living on the road with bands, but I couldn't raise a family. And I'd grown up in a large family in Saskatchewan, and I really decided that was one of my goals. So after I came back, as I say, I worked in writing for news. I worked with a lot of different artists producing records. And then really at a certain point, I thought, I've got to get into long form writing. And Goosebumps was one of my first long form jobs. Yeah. So I really got lucky. I've always thought that I must have had some lucky breaks along the way, you know. But I was also doing a show called Due South at the time, which was on CBS. And because that was a high profile show, I was working with a producer whose name was Paul Haggis. And Paul was an incredibly great person to work with, loved music. He was originally from Canada, but he'd produced a show called 30 something. I don't know if you guys remember any of these shows, but or have ever heard of them, but they were very successful shows at the time, and they really led to me getting opportunities that I just really didn't think I would ever have. So when Steve Levitan called me about doing music and like theme and score for Goosebumps, it was really I have to tell you, I didn't even know about the books. I didn't know. I literally did not know about the Goosebumps series. So, I've been a reader all my life, but as a kid growing up in the 50s, there was no Goosebumps.
Yeah. There was Twilight Zone, which was sort of the precursor to Goosebumps.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you've answered one of the questions right there, because we usually ask, did you know about the books before going in? So,
well, it's always a toss-up. Usually because Goosebumps up to that point was, assuming that the show was in production for about a year before it premiered, they were just about a couple years old up to that point. Yeah. So it wasn't really until the show that it really sort of took off. 95, 96, 7, that was like the real time when it started becoming.
No, you're absolutely right. We saw that change even in terms of having a little bit more money sometimes.
A bit more was coming in.
It's like an extra $5.
A little more crumbs.
Yeah. But one of the things I wanted to tell you is that, I spent a lot of time with a lot of great musicians in LA. Because Seals and Crofts, had a number of big hits, and Loggins and Messina had a number of big hits, and we were very active touring bands. We toured 200 days a year, played in every city and university you can imagine in the U.S. And but when I first started working with Seals and Crofts, all the guys in the band were from the band that ended up being Toto.
Yeah,
Jeff Porcaro, the bass player Mike Porcaro, David Hungate. The just incredible musicians, and of course Louis Shelton, who produced those records, was still alive. He lives in Australia, as a matter of fact. He's in Sydney.
I'll look him up.
Please do, because it's amazing the quality of musicianship and the quality of the songwriters that I got an opportunity to work with really affected me. I realized it was really such an incredible world that you could write, and what you would write would connect to people's emotions. And when you work with great songwriters, they don't necessarily know that they have that gift, but that gift is there in spades, and so it really has an impact. And so after Goosebumps too, I got to tell you, what happened to me was that the world really opened up to me. Because those series were popular, the series I worked on at that time, and then I got to work and write songs for Andrea Bocelli, the Italian tenor. I got to work with a number of really good artists that really kind of opened doors for me on the songwriting side as well. So, and then I got to work on The Passion of the Christ with Mel Gibson. I did about 25 minutes of that score. I did music research for that film, and a couple of films with Morgan Freeman. And I did one called The Lazarus Child, or sometimes it's called The Last Door. Angela Bassett and Andy Garcia. So my world really, once I started writing music for television, it really expanded into film easily because we don't have a lot of film composers in Canada. the one that you might know best is the guy that wrote the music for Life of Pi and won an Oscar for it.
Oh yeah, I forget his name, but I do
You know what? As far as we're concerned, you're the GOAT. Okay, for Canada. You like. I mean, you know what I mean? So, like,
well, as far
you're
as
the one we know, you are the one we know best.
if I could get that in writing, man, I would love that.
Yeah.
And I could distribute it in Canada.
We'll send a written note once we're done here. Did you ever have any like big inspirations in terms of being a musician and composer? Any sort of like musicians that inspired you?
Yeah. Well, I think I would have to say that Jim Seals and Dash Crofts of Seals and Crofts were a significant inspiration to me because they wrote music that had meaning, right? The lyrics were meaningful. It was very positive. They were uplifting. They really, I actually became a member of the Baha'i community around the same time that I started working with them, which was a community that really believes that humanity is one family and that we're moving towards a very bright future, despite our current conditions. That we're going through a dark time, but we're being prepared for something that's much greater, which is the idea of a united and peaceful world. So those guys had a big influence on me, both in terms of my thinking, my idea of what really inspires music. But the primary, I have to tell you, the primary inspiration for me was I studied classical piano as a child. So Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Chopin, Tchaikovsky, that was the music I really grew up on, which was quite different than most kids in Saskatchewan. most kids that grew
probably
up
most kids anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Most kids aren't exposed to that music, right? And I was, and it really had a profound effect on me. And not that I'll ever be anywhere near those. Like I consider myself a long distance away, and oftentimes I joke with my composer friends saying that we're all going to get, when we die and get to the next world, those composers are going to be standing with their hands out saying, "My royalties, please." for all the things that you borrowed.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, really quick, since you mentioned Baha'i, you are also the founder of the Live Unity Enterprises, which is basically dedicated to the production of music for the Baha'i community. What's that been like?
Well, I started doing those things actually before I did Goosebumps. I did my first recording for the Baha'i community in 1982. Just to give you an idea of how long I've been around, guys. So I really and I did a children's album. It wasn't scary.
That's okay.
It had songs about unity and love and kindness and all the things. Plus, I had young kids at the time. I had 3 young kids at the time, and so the music meant something to be able to try to inspire them to see themselves as world citizens, essentially. Mm-hmm. So it had a big impact on me, but also. I think that making those records, because they were made, I spent my own money on them. I wanted to do something that I thought would last a long time, and it worked. The kids still sing these songs 50 years later. It's like crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, to do something for essentially that's going to last so long, and especially for a certain group of people, certain community, is a very important thing to do. It's a very long-lasting action, and I can imagine it's just probably an amazing thing to be a part of.
It is, and the other thing is that I started writing songs when I came back from LA. I wrote a song for the Toronto Blue Jays, which is a baseball team. I don't know if they actually won the World Series in 92 and 93. Might be the last time we ever win a World Series. But I wrote a song for them called "Okay Blue Jays, Let's Play Ball," and that was in 1982, same year that I did this other recording and for the Baha'i community. That song is still used at every seventh inning stretch whenever the Blue Jays play in Toronto. And it's so weird, I have to tell you, to go to a game and have them play a song that you wrote all that time ago. I thought it might last a year, because sports people are very, very superstitious. So if the song worked for a year and it was associated with them having a pretty good year, if they had a bad year, they'd probably drop the song. I was sure, that's what would happen. But literally now this is 82 to 25. So it's 40.
You're looking at
43 years.
43. Yeah, 43.
43 years. Yeah.
Wow.
That they've continued to use it every seventh inning stretch.
They'll probably use it for another 43 years.
Let's hope so.
That's the thing. You never know what you're going to be, what you're going to make or be a part of, and it's just going to catch on.
Totally true. Yeah.
And it's like the things that could outlast you. Like it'll just go on forever. Maybe the purest form of immortality, so to say.
Well, yeah,
that's what they say.
It's really fun.
Yep. And speaking of things that catch on, let's move on to Goosebumps. And I gotta say, for one of your first, long form, television scoring, projects, Goosebumps is a hell of a one to start out with.
Yeah.
Because this show got really, really popular, and I guess the best place to start out is with the thing that everybody hears when you start a Goosebumps episode, and that's the very, very iconic theme song. So you were the composer behind this now honestly, even sometimes I would find people that say they know that song, but they don't know the show. It's just that popular. So when it came to creating that theme song, where did it start out? Were there any inspirations going into it?
Yeah, I remember very clearly the day I wrote it, because you're lucky in the world that I work in to get a day for anything. They call you on Monday and say, "Can you send a theme over tomorrow?" That's how it works. You don't, there's a thing in Canada called the Senate, which is, it's called the Chamber of Sober Second Thought. So that if the decisions are made by another arm of the government, the Senate gets to sort of step back a little bit and look at it and think about whether it's really a good idea. You kind of have the same thing with Congress, right?
Yeah.
We don't get that. You don't get sober second thought. You've got a day to put together an idea, and you got to find it, right? And so I loved. I've always loved the whole idea of creating mystery just with a minor figure. So that little sort of piano thing that starts the beginning of it is just was the thing that I thought. Here's the other thing. They send you pictures. They've already got something cut. Right? They had already cut the opening. And it was really eerie. And it was really, the whole thing with the guy with the suitcase or the briefcase and then the other dog and all the dog. Yeah. With the glowing eyes and everything. And when I actually watched it, I thought it was very nicely done. It was a really nice piece of cinema. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes that's all it takes, is you look at something visual like that, and then you get an idea. And I remember playing in that little simple piano repetitive figure off the top, because it's the other thing about music is it has the capacity to what I call hypnotize, right? Mm-hmm. The whole idea is that if you repeat something, all the composers through history have used repetition as a very powerful thing with slight variations each time, right? So I love that idea. And then when I come up with the thing that we were talking about earlier, it's just a very simple chord. It's called a D minor ninth chord, but the minor, the second, which is the note E, and then the third, which is the minor third. When you play them together, like a semitone together, it creates that kind of tension. And then I like the idea of coming out of that thing. Like, I love the idea of coming out into a rhythmic thing that would all of a sudden say, right?
Sort of like a crescendo. It builds up and then
it builds up into that, and then you have that figure, and it's kind of a bit of release. But then I thought, well, I can't do that over and over again for a minute.
Yeah.
So I remember the guy that was doing the programming at the time, Jim. Oh, I'll remember his name. Anyway, so I said, I'll do call and response. So the high note, right? The little dump, 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 dump. And then I'll respond with a bass note that feels like somebody's coming out of the dark at you, and it's low and it's a little menacing. But it's that very simple figure from there where it just goes up to the D, the E flat, and then the F down in the bass. So it had that kind of tension within it.
Down. Yeah.
And the back and forth dialogue, I thought that'll kind of make it tense, but it'll also make it something whereby you have momentum, right? Because when he's walking with that briefcase and things start to fly out, and then it cuts to the dog, it feels like he's going somewhere, but you're not sure where, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've studied that intro, but visually,
it's like,
I've seen it like so much that I can like memorize it in my head.
The way I always perceived it is it's R.L. Stine, obviously, it's his briefcase.
Yes,
and inside the briefcase is just like, it's his next story that he's written.
Yeah.
But all the pages have flown out, and now it's just like it's out in the world, and now it's in live action. We've got the the show, and that's what I always saw it as. Like, because when I did a cosplay of that exact thing, and I just had one of my Goosebump books was falling apart in my collection, so I just took the pages and just stuck them halfway out of the briefcase. So I'm like, it's just one of the stories. Like, and what happens is when it opens, it's out in the world now. And that's how I was
very interesting.
Now out there, and if it becomes, because the pages turn into the G. Yes. Like you can see they form the G, and then it starts going over everything and turning everything evil. So it's like, oh no, Goosebumps is unleashed now into the world. And
that's the lady on the billboard. I don't know what her person was. Like, she had a nice poofy hair, and then the G came by, and it all got flat and
straight.
yeah.
It looked a little disturbed.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things that I felt like, okay, you can't let up on the tension, right? Because things are being transformed, except they're being transformed into something darker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does that back and forth figure, call and response between the bass and the 5-note figure, dum, 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 dum. And then when it starts to turn the world, there's an old trick that people always used to say in pop music is when you're bored of the 1 chord, which is the D minor, then you go to the 4 chord, right, which is G. But normally the G would be in a major, and this time I used the G as the movement to the 4th chord, which feels like a lift out of the D minor, but then the right hand does the chromatic thing. So you have that kind of tension build into the part where you have the longer melody, but you're doing a da da dum da da dum da da dum. You're continuing to build tension, and then when it comes back to the dun 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 dun, that figure, you feel like it's a release from the tension of the 4 chord. And there's a thing where we always always, whenever you wanted to sort of scare people, you would always use what are called diminished chords, right? Because they've been used in horror music for decades. if you listen to any of the Alfred Hitchcock scores with Bernard Herrmann, it's all strings, and it's all those tense chords. And that kind of insistent kind of like a sound of those tensions building and building and building throughout his scores. So, I ended up going to the University of Saskatchewan before I moved to LA, where I studied composition, studied orchestration. So I can write for orchestra. I can really write for any kind of ensemble. But you learn when you study film music, you learn as much as when you study Mozart.
Yeah,
because film music is one of the few places where music of that kind with a big orchestra lives, right? It doesn't exist in most formats. I mean, we all live in cities. Most of us live in cities where we have orchestras, but it's sort of like a museum, right? And then they play some contemporary music, but they often play for the satisfaction of listeners. They play more traditional classical or romantic music. But when you study film music and you study people like Bernard Herrmann, you realize that they were masters of understanding how to orchestrate something, right? And so when I originally put all those low parts, I had these things called marcato strings, which are like a sample that you can get of an orchestra. We use samples like the Vienna Symphony Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And they have actual recordings of great string sections playing notes that are called marcato, which means that it's very marked, it's very short, and has a lot of impact. So we used a lot of that both in the theme and in the score. And that's when I sent the theme, they said, "Can you make it a little less scary?" So I had to pull back the marcato strings in the bass, not make it quite as scary, make it a little bit more. I don't know. I guess the word would be make it a little bit more pop, a little less intense. Mm-hmm. But the end result of it was that they did that Vincent that Vincent voice. What was his name? Vincent Price.
Oh yeah. The Viewer Beware.
Yeah. Yeah, you're in for a scare. And I brought in a friend of mine named Cal Dodd. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
He was on here and he told us that.
Yep. That he did the voice, and he said he did the barking dog too.
Yes. Yeah.
So he definitely did.
It's funny because even though he said that, we had so many people like, why wouldn't Jack Lenz just use a dog and change the voice? Like, what? Okay, Cal Dodd did it. Like,
yeah, very hard to tune a dog. I don't think
Cal Dodd's a liar, but okay.
Yeah. So, I did a bunch of records with Cal over the years, and he's one of the funniest guys ever. And he is. I did a series for Nickelodeon called Mr. Meaty, a very strange series called Mr. Meaty. And Cal sang the theme song, and the words in the theme song were all God's creatures fresh off the grill. Come on down to Mr. Meaty. We'll be happy to meet you.
I remember that show like terrified me as a kid because that came out when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
It was very strange.
That was Cal. It's amazing, like when we talk to voice actors like Cal, and they're just like, okay, I know he did Slappy, and then later, like you're like, oh wait a minute, he was Wolverine also.
Yeah,
totally different. And then he says, oh yeah, no, I did the intro for the Goosebumps too. I was like, no, he's like, I did that. He's like, I also did the dog. I'm like, no.
Yeah, I remember when he told us that we had no idea beforehand, and he told us that, and legitimately on camera you could see our like actual surprise.
Yeah, he kept sort of adding things to the list. I did this and this. Next up, what I was going to say, it's the guy in the intro dressed as R.L. Stein. Like I thought he may as well say he was that too.
But it just shows how versatile he is.
That was me on the billboard. That was me with makeup and like, oh, what's next?
Yeah, I know. He's incredible. I actually did a big band record with him, doing all these old standards, except with a fantastic big band off the floor. It's a fantastic record. He's an extraordinary
singer.
Yeah.
He said he worked with I think with Rory Gallagher or someone like that. Is that true? Because my dad passed away, was a huge Rory fan. He went all the way to Cork just to go to his museum.
Wow.
Just see all his stuff up on the wall. So when he said that, I thought, wow, what a small world. Like, you know, being a big fan of him, because he was so good with the guitar.
Cal is still like a huge talent. I mean, he's older now, but you know, he was there during those times when you could call him and he could do anything.
Yeah.
He was a great singer, but he also had good voices. Yeah.
No.
Very talented.
Very talented guy.
Very versatile.
Yeah, that's funny. That I'm so glad we remembered him, because that he made a big difference. And so when that voice came in, I really knew that we had something that we could build to, which was viewer beware, you're in for a scare. And then dum dum bum 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 rump, and just like end it intense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had to fight for that, because they thought that was too big of an ending. They wanted to sort of something that would be a bit easier into the show. And you don't win a lot of arguments with producers.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I couldn't imagine it different though. Like dun 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 dun, dun. Like just the way it ends. Yeah. Like I can't imagine it ending differently. Yeah. Like then it jumps in.
I actually found, and I don't know where this originated from, but I found, I guess it was an original version of the opening titles, because it had a different version of the theme song. And I remember you had said that you were working with one that had a lot more bass in it. It was a lot more prevalent, and it had that. Maybe I'll have to send it to you after this, but it is weird, because there is a lot more of like the bumping bass in it, and not as many sound effects. So I'm wondering if that was like a very, very early version of the opening.
We did a couple of versions like that, and some of them did travel. But we also did an ultimate Goosebumps kind of version.
Yep.
which had a much bigger, what we call bottom end to it, and also just a lot. The drums were a lot more upfront, right? Like that was interesting too, because I had originally pitched them on doing just an orchestral version of the thing, just so I could make the strings scarier and all that. But then I played them one where we used the loop, right? And the loops at that time, they weren't in abundance like they are now. You had very limited choices in terms of what you could find online for loops. But I really loved that one, and it stuck.
Yeah, no, that one was great, because that came in. That was the third season. They rebranded the whole show to Ultimate Goosebumps. Yeah. For that season alone, and it had that title, and it was very different. It was familiar, but it was different, because it was a lot more punchy. It was a lot more of the very extreme, like I call them like 90s riff guitar instruments that was very prevalent in the later half of the show.
Yeah.
But that one was just so more in your face with the visuals and everything like that, and the music matched it. I remember just being blown away from it when I first saw it.
Yeah, it's always when people say they're going to change a theme, you always sort of want to run and hide. Why wreck a good thing, right?
It's like I already worked so hard to make it good. Like, you want me to do it again?
Yeah, but the score was a lot easier, because they didn't have really any time to do changes. We had basically 3 days to write a score, and then you'd have to present it and then make it whatever changes there was time for, and then you had to orchestrate and add other orchestral stuff to it, because they were most of a lot of it was fundamental in piano keyboards, but it still had, I felt it had to have an orchestral quality, because you could get so much more range and so much more terror out of orchestral sounds,
Definitely. And when it came to doing the scores for the individual episodes, because, there were so many episodes would have different vibes, different sort of personalities. What was sort of the process for scoring each individual episode? Would they give you sort of like a summary of what the episode was about?
No, we always worked a picture. We got the picture. That's why the time frame was so short, because they had to, I don't think they spent more than 3 or 4 days shooting an episode. It's pretty limited.
Yeah, typically right? It was about a week, unless it was a two-parter.
Yeah, and then we got basically a rough cut, which didn't change a lot generally. I mean, there'd be some network notes, there'd be some scholastic notes, but it's a service-oriented job, right? You basically take the notes, you implement the notes, you don't argue. You don't contest things. You just try to make it better if you can. And if you really have to fight for an idea, it's on rare occasions, because it just takes more time that you don't have, right? So you basically try to get the themes outlined. And the first we would see of it, nobody had time to read scripts. The first time we saw it was pretty well, even though it was a rough cut, it was pretty well the finished picture. Mm-hmm. So you scored the picture all the time. I'll never forget doing the library. I think the library was the first one that we did, with the spiders. And
oh yeah,
I had a terrible fear of spiders as a kid. I could barely watch that episode.
Yeah. I remember you saying about how you didn't know how that one made it to air for like a kids show. I do remember you saying that.
Yeah, it was the scariest episode, I think, for me. But it was also the idea that this very creepy guy, who what was he going to do next, right? That was he was really.
It was.
Yeah,
it was a traumatizing episode. It really was. It scared my brother half to death, and a lot of others.
And I remember that
the way it's shot.
Yeah, and because it was the first one that we did, you really remember it, because it was sort of like, okay, how far do we go here? Because we can make this terrifying, even more terrifying with music. Mm-hmm. And they were pretty cautious about it at first, and I think it was because it was such a scary episode. It was sort of like they kept pulling us back. I would use these things called orchestra strikes that you could create with timpani, low bass strings, and then very dissonant chords, that you would combine on top of that, and sometimes even with brass or and percussion to create what would be a scary moment that the viewer wasn't expecting, but it was one of those gotcha moments, right?
Mm-hmm. It really was.
I had a few of those in the first episode, and they were freaked out. They just said, "No, you can't use that. That's way too scary." Mm-hmm. So it started that way, where we kept pulling back because we thought, it needs to be scary. It's supposed to be scary. Well, why are you telling us not to make it scary? And
especially given the visuals that you literally just watched, that were
I know
as well for what's considered for children.
I know, and I kept thinking about my own kids. Would I let my kids watch this? And I kept thinking, no, I wouldn't. I'd be, I don't think my wife would let them watch it, much less me. So, but it was interesting how that relaxed after a period of time. Like one third, fourth, fifth episode in, and there was another composer who was scoring every second one. Brad, did you ever speak to Brad?
Brad, no, we have not, but we'd like to. But sure, I was going to bring him up because you sort of both worked in tandem on this show.
Well, he scored everyone because they were concerned, and maybe rightfully so. But I could have managed it. I met their deadlines all the time, and it wasn't ever a question. But they were nervous about how much work it was, so they overlapped scoring, and so he had to kind of follow the direction that I was setting from the top, not just with the theme, but also with the idea of it being orchestral, and hopefully, having enough similarity in the style sounds that people wouldn't feel like it was two different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it worked generally. I've kept in touch with him. I haven't talked to him in a while, but we had a good relationship. We never actually worked together on anything.
Yeah.
It was because there wasn't time. I would get the first episode, we'd be scoring that, and by the time we were almost finished that, he would get the next one, and then we'd get the next one within a couple of days. So it worked out well just in terms of that. But it was also, I think I'm trying to remember the number of episodes. You guys will know this, but I thought it was over 70 episodes over the
74.
Yeah,
74, something like that.
I believe.
If you
Plus
count,
plus the 1 hour specials,
Yeah, if you counted every 1 hour special is like 2 episodes for 2 parts, it's about 74 episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it literally says on my box set, includes all 74 episodes. That's just how I know. Like, I just look at that and go, yep, that's obviously it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But I did all the hour-long ones. He didn't do any of the hour-long ones, I don't think.
Those are the best ones.
Yeah.
He did. He did Werewolf of Fever Swamp.
Oh, that's true. He did the werewolf one. That's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
right.
because I think that in Terror Tower came basically like back
That's
to
right.
back.
They were back to back. Yeah.
Yep.
Which I thought was interesting that they were doing 1 hour episodes, and I guess because they were sort of like getting enough demand. The show is popular enough that they could sustain the audience for an hour. But I love the 1 hours. I thought they were a lot more fun.
We've always talked about how they're basically like among the best episodes because they're the ones that they knew how to use their extra time to their benefit to drag out the suspense and they were usually also the ones that were a lot scarier. Werewolf of Fever Swamp definitely is like a very intense episode.
Yeah.
And for sure, the music in that one definitely adds to a lot of the reason of why it's scary. One thing I always personally loved is when they use guitar riffs, like for very, very extreme chase scenes, because it always just was like the perfect, I guess, sort of atmosphere that you're sending for like when you're getting chased by something really, really scary.
Yeah. One of my favorite themes was the Slappy theme, because we found this really interesting kind of sample of low brass with this kind of almost like a blat sound to it, and when you combine that with the intensity of the percussion and the continuance of it, it was pretty creepy. And so there, there's still very much in my memory, but I when I put together the soundtrack with Enjoy the Ride with Ross at Enjoy the Ride Records, I was trying to pick from a broad enough kind of selection of what is 70 plus episodes. You're trying to pick pieces that you think will be memorable and hold up or stand up. It was challenging.
And they all do. I mean, even when it came out, we all talked about like, okay, well, are they going to do another one because there's still music missing? We want to hear that too. And when then we did the next album that came out that had like a few extras on there, I think they call it the deluxe version.
You had this one, which came first, and then you had the one that Isaiah held up, which is this one, which had the previously unreleased side C. So you've got like a whole three different versions of Money. Theme Ultimate 2, and the house theme, and oh man, I love it. But then I don't know. I was actually going to ask you, Jack. Did they give you one of these? No. The test. So this was the test pressing that they did for the record. So there's apparently only 24 of them.
Wow.
So I was going to ask, but they obviously they sent you one of the vinyls. Yeah, they did. Cool. Yeah.
It's funny, I was I literally talked to Ross for almost 2 years, and he and I both kept going back to Scholastic, asking if they would do it, and they always said no, right? And finally, he had already paid me in advance on the record because he really felt it was going to happen. He felt he was getting closer, and he paid me in advance. And I thought to myself, this, you know, there's a baseball player that used to say, baseball has been very, very good to me, you know. And so I always thought Goosebumps has been very, very good to me, because even after all these years, I still get royalties for all the places where it continues to play. You know, even this much later, right? It's crazy. But I never expected that Scholastic would say yes. I really had a lot of respect for Ross, because he just didn't give up, man. He just kept pressing and pressing, and they finally said yes.
Wow, maybe that's what we need to do. We need to keep pushing them.
Yeah, no, you have to. You have to.
That's what it is. Because
they it's a whole new generation of people there, and they know nothing about music. I mean, they never have. I mean, I dealt with that early, because all the producers wanted to do a soundtrack, and we couldn't get them to do anything when we were making the show. We wanted to sort of get music out there and have fun with it that way, but it just never happened. Right?
That would have been amazing to have one for actually in the 90s. Like, could you imagine a cassette? Well, you had, as we've said before, there was just this one.
Yeah.
But obviously they came to you when they did this one, because it does have the theme song on there.
Yeah.
Like they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that Scholastic gave them permission to do that.
Really?
Oh. Well, and also before Enjoy the Ride Records released their record, I remember the first time this music got released was actually on YouTube. It came from the 90s' YouTube channel. That was like the first place to get some of these tracks.
That was Ezra when we did the interview a long time ago. Because I think he asked you during that interview that he asked if we would ever get this. I feel like we almost have to thank Ezra for this, because he is the one that actually asked you. And I remember I was there, and I thought, oh my God, he's actually asking. Like I don't know if we should be doing that or not.
and I remember even saying to Ezra, I said, you know, just please don't say that I said so.
If anything happens, I was not involved.
yeah.
Ezra, thank you.
Yeah, Ezra, thank you, and thank God for the internet. Because you know, they just can't keep track. It's like everything that I have that's on the internet, I would never have a chance of trying to keep up with all the uses. And I don't really think it's such a big deal. I think you know, it's a terrible thing to say, but I actually think music should be free. I think they should pay musicians well to play on it and to make it, and then they should just make it available to people. Nobody paid for music for centuries, right? If you went to the church, you heard the music of J.S. Bach, right? You weren't paying for it, and the music was. It's I don't know. I have the same theory that I think. I hope will endure with people, but it's not our music. I say this about our house, the beach in front of our house all the time, because people are always saying, "Oh, you know, we have to make sure that it's a private beach and all this crap." And I always say, "You know whose beach it is?" And they say, "Whose beach is it?" I say, "It's God's beach." and when you die, we're all just renting. And when you die, there'll be somebody else that will be renting it, right?
Nothing is sacred.
And music should be the same. Music is about beauty and love and art and, you know, the human spirit. Don't put a price on it. Don't make it competitive. Make it for joy and give it away, right?
I say the same thing.
Doesn't mean you can't pay the people to make it. Like Mozart. Mozart got paid to make music because he had people who thought he was talented and gave him money, gave him commissions.
Yeah,
that world is gone, right? Now we have everybody just wanting to control it and wanting to monetize it, and you're paying somebody like Paul Simon $300 million for his catalog. Give it away.
Well,
Who
and
needs all that?
especially with, with Goosebumps, because, it's awesome that we have the tracks available that we do now, but there's so many more.
Yeah.
Even on Brad's side, there's so many episodes that he's done as well. And it just sucks that there is so much like stigma on the side of Scholastic to release it, because there's shows now that have full, like, just entire catalogs of scores
Yeah.
now available on
Yeah.
CD or vinyl or cassettes or whatever.
Yeah.
And yet we're very limited with our access to Goosebumps.
Yeah.
You're right about this too.
Yeah.
I've
crazy.
just read the back of it, and there is no Scholastic trademark on this at all. None. It's just Parachute Press,
Yeah.
Protocol Entertainment, though, which obviously did the Goosebumps show.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's literally Protocol and Parachute. There's no Scholastic.
Well, that just goes back to what Jack was saying earlier. Then that Fox had a bit more say at the time.
Yeah.
Scholastic.
Yeah.
Game was not the '90s show.
Yeah.
Which I wish was still the case, because again, like we talked about, like with the '90s show, I don't know why Scholastic like just treats it like a redheaded stepchild, if you will. As
Yeah.
the saying goes.
Sure.
They even though that's what really boosted them in the '90s, and people still love it so much today, I don't know, they just like want to distance themselves from it, which is really odd.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's a culture of it's a book culture. It's not a television culture. It never graduated from being a book culture. And so the idea that you can somehow protect things and keep them from people, or you can sell your hardcover books, and if you have to, you'll sell soft covers.
Right.
It's more that kind of thinking. I understand it. But ultimately, like the beach, it's God's music. You just you hope that in your life, all of us do, that you can be an instrument of something greater.
Yep.
Have an impact through your life on others, and serve, show kindness. I've never understood the competitive nature of music. I don't think it was intended for competition. It was intended to bring joy, or to bring fun, or to bring, people love it for all the right people love it for all the right reasons, but I don't think the people who distribute it feel that way.
How it makes you feel. Music makes you feel a certain way when you hear it.
Well, it comes from the heart.
It comes from the heart. It changes. Like, let's say your mood, you're just not in a good mood, but a certain type of music can just lift you.
Yeah.
And, even if it's just for a brief moment, but it makes you feel a certain way, and music's very important, I think. It helps a lot of people. It's helped people through depression, all sorts of things. It's, it's important.
Well,
Music's important.
I have to tell you, one of the things I do every day is I play for my daughter. I have a beautiful old 9-foot grand piano upstairs, and it's about 137 years old, and it still sounds amazing. And beautiful resonance in it, and I bring her up in her wheelchair right beside me, and I just play for her, and I feel a sense of calm from her, like she does. She's never had a seizure when I'm playing, but I can't play for her all the time. So but I have that time every day that I do that, and it's such a joy, because I feel like I can maybe bring her some calm, maybe bring her a sense of peace, maybe a sense of beauty that she wouldn't normally experience if she was in a home somewhere, or if she didn't have, a dad that played music. But I really feel like that's a great purpose for music, is just even to bring calm to people, and I know that Goosebumps never really did that, but at least it was a fun experience for people.
There was sort of that, and actually that leads into my next question. Goosebumps, it sort of had like specific character themes, and one of them that definitely sticks with a lot of people because it's the most popular episode is from The Haunted Mask. definitely the music from that one is very iconic.
Carly's theme.
Carly Beth's theme is
That
a
makes
very
you feel-
slow, very emotional, personal.
Yeah.
You know,
There were moments. Absolutely, there were moments. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it
but maybe
adds
not
to the
like the
emotion of
Goosebumps
that
theme,
episode.
even though the Goosebumps theme will trigger happiness in a lot of people because they, even if they haven't watched that show in a while, they'll remember that the moment the first note hits.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons, I mean, you might not remember certain things from episodes per se, but you typically remember music. Something about music triggers in your head more than anything else. And it's the same for a lot of other iconic, even TV themes, you know, Married with Children, you know, had an iconic one, or, you
Love and Marriage.
Cheers had a great, Cheers had a great one. I mean, there's a lot of classic television shows that have iconic theme songs that people will always remember, even if they don't remember the episodes themselves.
And they invoke a sense of
you're so right, because it's connected to memory. It's interesting how it's connected to memory. And if you remember a childhood and that childhood was enjoyable, or you had moments in that were connected to, well, even things that were scary, like I remember things as a kid that were scary, and even though at the time they were scary, when you look back at it, you remember how strong your emotions were, right? It's like they're, and so music really, you're so right. It's so connected to memory that it doesn't necessarily mean that it was connected to you to an unhappy memory. It's just connected to memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In terms of specific episodes, oh, sorry, Nick, did you have a continuation?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to comment one thing on, because I know you said you play for your daughter, and I know there are people who go to like nursing homes and things like that and play for people that are there. You know, I don't have that musical talent, unfortunately, but I applaud the people that do that, though.
Yeah.
Because, again, you know, like you said, you know, what would it be like if, you know, she was in there? You know, and I know what it's like because my mom is a dietary manager at a nursing home, and I used to go visit her all the time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I can remember some of the people there, and a lot of them don't get people who come and visit them.
It's true.
Some are, if they do, it's very rare. So if you get somebody who can come in there, talk to them for a little bit, or play some music, it like makes their day.
Oh, it does. You're absolutely right. I have a friend in New York City named Michael, and he's an amazing gospel singer, and he's made a whole career out of just going to homes for the elderly. And he goes in and does an hour of gospel music and singing inspirational songs for them. People just love it. You know, it really lifts them up.
Yeah,
and that's what they need, because honestly, some of those places are kind of depressing. Like,
one of my friends works in a nursing home, and she just plays Elvis music. That's it, just Elvis. But like some of the more softer songs.
Yeah.
And she said a lot of them, you know, they don't really move or too much. But she said once she plays Elvis, she can see some of them just sort of like, you know, their foot going like this, or their hand, you know, like once they hear it.
Coming to life.
So I'm like, wow. She said, I just put on Elvis and that's it. And then I see some movement. And I said, the power of the king, right? You know, power of the king. Like you just, So,
absolutely. So well, it's an important thing. And again, if it's connected to memory, elderly people are going to really, enjoy having, music played to them, because for some people, it's sometimes one of the biggest things that they remember. It brings them back to a simpler time, and it's very important. 100%. So when it came to some of the more commonly used instruments in terms of, scoring, you had said you use a lot of piano and orchestral, but there were many episodes where there would sort of be like their own spin to the score, like something added in. So I remember like Terror Tower, for instance, had a lot of sort of like that medieval sound to it, a lot of old-time English flutes and whatnot. Or Headless Ghost would have a lot of that nautical theme to it, sort of like a like a faint singing in the background.
Yeah.
What were some of the thought processes behind some of those?
Well, I think whenever they went into sort of like, for example, the whole medieval thing with Terror Tower, that it was the idea that you have a bit of Celtic influence to the music. Not that necessarily music was even like that during medieval times, but when you think about it, I went through this on the Passion of the Christ film as well, because Mel Gibson kept saying, "Can't we have music that sounds like 2,000 years ago?" And I said, "Well, just try to find me something." It's like, the concept being that during certain periods, especially the medieval times, would be primarily it would be flutes, because they were an easy instrument to make. They were a reed instrument initially, in the sense that it was a reed that would be hollowed out, and then they'd have holes that would determine the sort of pitch. Mm-hmm. And then obviously they were starting to make wooden flutes. Any kind of metal flutes didn't really happen until the 19th century, maybe a little earlier. But a lot of the instruments, orchestral instruments, were made out of wood and strings. So, the medieval stuff was really about having a Celtic influence, having that kind of idea of that Celtic music would suggest the medieval times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think with Headless Ghost, we used a few times. We used this idea that you would hear what you thought were voices, but they'd be processed voices, right? Or they'd be taking a vocal sample, and then making it a little bit more eerie, making it a little bit more distant. I remember we used a lot of not just piano, but we used things like vibes and marimbas and mallet instruments as well. It was all samples. You have to realize this was sort of early 90s, and the whole sampling world was just starting. Really for orchestral scoring, we went from orchestras being the primary thing used for film scores, and obviously guitars and contemporary instruments. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't really until computers started becoming more prolific that then we could use samples of instruments. Mm-hmm. And people making all kinds of, like, the palette changed, if you can imagine. Within a decade, the palette changed from what was traditional musical instruments, the string family, the brass family, percussion family, probably what would have been a normal sort of an orchestral kind of complement was magnified about 1,000 times in a very short period of time, where people were actually creating sounds that were made out of samples, were made out of the first time I used a mini Moog was in 75, right?
Yeah,
and it took a long time, even then, with those instruments, to become something that was now an expansion over a decade or two, an expansion into increasing that palette that was available to composers by thousands of times. Mm-hmm. You even had orchestras now that were sampled, where you could use orchestral samples that you would have died to have a real orchestra, but it was all as we referred to it. All those scores were done in the box, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, done with computers and samples, and even pianos. We didn't have real pianos. We used piano samples, because they sounded as good as any piano that you could record in a studio.
Mm-hmm. Probably made piano lessons can be murder a lot.
Yeah,
I was literally thinking that one too.
Yeah,
it's one of the best episodes too. Like, that's one of the better 20-minute episodes.
Yeah,
People
that
always
one
talk about
freaky. That one freaked me out.
It was freaky. Like, I feel like season 1 had the best sort of 20-minute. I mean, there was some on season 2 as well, but I feel like pretty much all of them on season 1 were good. Like in terms of the shorter episodes, like because
they were the scariest.
They were the scariest. You had Girl Who Cried Monster. You know, Cricket Lunch is one of the best scores, and then you've got your Night Loving Dummy 2. You've got Piano Lessons Can Be Murder. You know, like those are all great episodes on that first season. You know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you know, you always start by thinking of an orchestral palette. You're like, it's just natural to know that you're going to have the most expression. I mean, people spent 300, 400 years developing those instruments, and there was a reason that they did, is because they spoke to people, right? The violin was the closest that someone could get to the human voice when it was played properly.
Yeah, I remember. My dad used to say, if he had to make a choice between keeping his sight or his hearing, he said, I'd choose hearing. And I'm thinking, really? But wouldn't you want to be able to still see like the world? And he's like, no, I need my music.
Yeah,
I need my music. Like, if I had to choose, I'm sorry, like I would rather be blind than not be able to hear music. And I thought, wow, like, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and he was a music man. He had over 30,000 vinyls. You know, he had so many. So it was, no, he had to have his music. That was it. Because he said, I can still feel the record player. I can still feel what I'm doing, and I can put it on. But I said, yeah, but you won't know what's what. He's like, that's what I've got you for. You tell me what what's this one? Rolling Stones? Okay, on it goes. Like, you know. So,
it's so true. And that aspect of it where you're kind of looking for the sounds that will match the visuals. Ultimately, you know, the music is in film or in television is supposed to support the picture, right? There are lots of examples where people play counter to the visuals, and then music can become even more abstract, right? But we couldn't really get them to do much of that. It was a more literal approach, I think, is the best way to describe it, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
I worked with the guy that did the movie Crash, which was a Canadian guy named Paul Haggis, who I mentioned did this series called Due South. And he would love to have, you know, you'd be in a very tense kind of chase scene where, you know, people are at risk and lives are at risk. And he'd want to use some opera piece that was just this, you know, very peaceful piece of music against that car chase, because he loved the idea of pushing the boundaries and making people see the experience in a really different way from a piece of music.
Yeah.
But with Goosebumps, it was pretty literal. They wanted the music to reflect the characters and reflect the action, and they didn't mind it being on the nose, because they thought there's no reason to be sophisticated or too sophisticated if you're making things for children.
Well, that's the funny thing, is that because I already mentioned Terror Tower and Headless Ghost, they had very specific, additions to their scores to add to the atmosphere and the setting. But then there's also ones like Scarecrow Walks at Midnight has a very farmy sort of like sound to it. There's a lot of like not banjos, but sort of just kind of like, I don't know how to really describe it. Just sort of like, you're on a farm. This is what you'd hear if you're on a farm. With banjos, that's actually more in How to Kill a Monster, because that's in a swamp in a very redneck area. Yeah. So you hear like the...
You do hear banjos. You do hear banjos in the one.
Or Go Eat Worms, because it's like it's dealing with the very creepy crawly feel. It has a lot of like very high like twinges, just like adds to the creepy nature.
Yeah,
just to name it.
Yeah, there was some. We had some freedom there when it came to kind of creating sounds, music sounds that felt like they were atmosphere. We got away with some things there where it was a little bit more abstract.
Yeah. And that, just even in Fever Swamp, like I really I know that one wasn't one of yours, but I know you said too that they wanted to keep Brad kind of on the same page with you, and I think he did carry that over pretty well. Because I don't know what he used there either, but he had something that was more like a country twang thing to it, because they were out, in the boonies and the small stuff. So based on the episodes we were just talking about that you did that were kind of the same, he really did keep in that same ballpark. But like, what was it with like the Haunted Mask and some others? Did you have a choir available? Because you do have that voice in the background that kind of like starts off low, and then like as the music starts to get more tense, the voice raises as well. And it really makes the scene obviously way more intense, and as they should be, because it's the moment that the shopkeeper finds Carly Beth in his back laboratory with all the unloved ones. So did you have access to a choir as well, or was that something?
Yeah, they were all sampled choirs, but we even used them in the theme song. We had those big sustaining kind of chords were all vocal ensemble chords. So it always worked really well, because I used to think there was nothing scarier than a Russian choir. Because the basses can go down to the lowest A, and normally basses in most European, most even North American choirs, the basses don't sing below a middle C. The Russians sing a third lower than that, down to the A. Russian choirs are famous for having basses that can go down to that low note. But of course, when you're doing samples, you can do anything you want. So they can sound like they're just like really low, right? And at the same time, the upper singers, especially in certain ranges, really do sound almost angelic. But if you combine them with a synth sound that's got a bit of a wobble to it, or a bit of a pitch variance, they become quite scary sounding, right? So the vocal sounds were never used probably just by themselves. They were always combined with some kind of a synth pad that made them feel a bit more eerie, a bit darker. And I think that was very much a way that we did it. We were never just content to be able to just use an orchestral sound or use a choir sound. It always had to be combined with something that made it a bit off. I guess it's the best word. And I think that's a technique that I've used a lot. Even when I use orchestras for a film score, I'll always, when I bring it back, after, like I do a lot of recording in Munich, in Berlin, Bratislava, Budapest. Those are the main ones. Just because it's Czechoslovakia and Prague. Those are the main studios where now you can go and record a full score with an orchestra for $30,000. The same recording in New York or Toronto or LA would cost you 3 or 4 times that. So you get a full symphony. But in the case of Goosebumps, we got a full symphony with the Vienna Symphony Orchestra library. You get the full symphony sounds or the full choral sounds, but you'd always combine them with altered sounds or altered pitch, because it's partly unsettling to the ear, right? The ear is kind of trying to figure out what it is. And I think that's part of that's sort of part of the fun of it, is just even in that one that Brad did, that swampy kind of guitar sound, which is always, we pay tribute always in scoring to those iconic things like the movie Deliverance, right?
That was my first thought too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's backwoods and you kind of get that. Too.
And whoever came up with it, who knows whether they actually ever used a guitar or played those kind of things, or the banjo notes. I don't think probably some composer made it up in his mind that that's what it should sound like.
It's just synonymous with it now. Another thing I like too is whenever the Goosebumps like melody is incorporated into the score, because it happens quite a few times in the show, or even when there's like a full on like new variation of it. Like I mentioned Terror Tower and Headless Ghost and Bad Hair Day, which I think Brad did. All had like a special ending credits version of the theme song that matched with the score of that episode. So Terror Tower is a very Celtic medieval sort of thing.
Yeah.
Don't forget, home video from Living Dummy 2 is also a very
yeah.
When they showing but it worked so well with like, because it was like literally just clips of his like, you know, family doing stupid things, like basically.
It was a goofy one.
It was like a mischievous version of the thing.
Yeah.
America's funniest home videos.
Yeah, like literally Goosebumps funniest home video. Yeah, and then but then there was I guess this is probably going to be a question coming up, but the Goosebumps Gotcha rap. Who sings that?
How did that come about?
Oh, this I have to tell you, this was our failed attempt at trying to get Scholastic to do a record that would have one song on it that was actually written for Goosebumps, right? So I was working with two hip hop groups, one called Plains of Fascination, which is PLAINS, Plains of Fascination. Mm-hmm. And then another solo artist who was actually one of the rappers in Plains of Fascination called Talisman, TALISMAN. And I did a record with him. I produced a record with Talisman called 80 Million Isms. And so it was very much that kind of style where it had a bit of a kind of a sample jazz kind of vibe to it. He was really ahead of his time. He was really an amazing Canadian rapper, and the son of a friend of mine. And so I said to him, if could you, and because Richard was one of the other rappers, I said, could you and Richard do this idea called Gotcha by the Goosebumps, and they liked the title, and I said it just it has to kind of be about being scared. and so I presented it to Scholastic, and it was just like I remember one of the comments was, I'm not sure that rap is something that kids will like.
Go figure.
Serious. That was their response. I'm not sure that rap is something kids will like. I said,
imagine.
I said, I don't even know how to respond to that. It's like, do you have any idea how popular this music is? Right? Any concept at all? Like, and it was like I almost didn't know what to say, but it was just like.
There could have been like a single, like I could just imagine it now, like a single of that. You know, there could have been an MTV like music video that goes with it.
And we wanted to do a video using footage from the show, and they wouldn't let us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's it. Everything had raps, so that you should have been like, "Have you not seen Pokemon?"
I was gonna say, have you ever met a child? Like,
oh my goodness, yeah. But you know, it's crazy.
Rap in the 80s and 90s was huge. Like, I don't know what it's like today, because typically rap isn't my forte of music, but I know it's very popular.
NWA, Public Enemy, like my goodness, like it was
massive. It was massive, and I said that to them. Yeah. I said, I can tell you that probably every kid that's watching Goosebumps has a favorite rap song. Mm-hmm. Every single kid has a favorite rap song, especially in the 90s.
Most of the kids you saw back then had like their hat backwards with their Goosebumps shirt. And you're like, oh, he listens to rap. Like
a very rebellious era.
It wasn't rebellious, but it wasn't in terms of them, because they were about selling books. And the idea of books and selling books was their thing, and they were so successful at it. When you think about the number of books, the R.L. Stine books that Scholastica sold.
Yeah.
So it was like the golden goose, right? And they didn't want it. Sometimes I even thought they never wanted to do a television show. I think somebody talked them into it. Fox.
Wow.
Because just
truly believe that.
Hearing their responses, having somebody actually, after we presented this idea of doing a soundtrack, and the lead song would be this gotcha song, and it would have the theme on it, have variations of the theme, have some score pieces. And, we presented, I thought we did a great presentation of it. And it was just like, it hardly even registered. Yeah. And then when we Steve Levitan actually went to bat for it and said, this is fabulous. Let's put the song out. Let's do a video, all this sort of stuff. They said, no, I don't think kids are that interested in rap.
Why not now? It's not too late.
Amazing to me.
We'll mash up some clips from the show and put the song over it. I mean,
Yeah, we could certainly do it on YouTube, couldn't we?
Yeah, like
somebody could, honestly. With all the
I gotta be honest,
filmmakers now.
Yeah. I've put that song. So, because obviously when you post on like Instagram and stuff, you can use the music as long as it's through the copyright thing. So I've used the Gotcha song on a few.
Oh, great.
And then I noticed other people started using it. And I'm like, could you imagine if this actually was released back then? It's actually, and it sounds kind of like, I like it, to be honest. Like, that's why I've used it a lot on a lot of like reels and stuff. It just works really well.
It's a fun song.
It's very fun. It's got the 90s sound and feel. And hearing you say that Scholastic weren't interested and almost weren't interested even in the show.
Well, how ironic.
It just makes you think like they could have done without the merchandise. They would have just done the books by the sounds of it. But could you imagine if we didn't get any of the other stuff? Like, it was just the books and nothing else. Like,
it wouldn't be nearly as popular as what it is if it wasn't for, in my opinion, the 90s show. Because as we talked about earlier in this episode, it really blew up after that.
It did.
And
it did. No, you're absolutely right.
You didn't know about Goosebumps books before. You found out after that show.
Yeah.
So they really went well hand in hand.
And the ratings on the show, I remember Steve Levitan calling me after season 1. I think it was maybe we were partway into season 2, because every time you renew a season, they always make the decision based on the ratings, right? And Steve Levitan said a very funny thing to me. He said, I said, well, what do you think? Do you think they're going to continue it? Because that was every year on every show, it was, are we going to keep going, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if I've ever done, it's always the question. I did a show for Hallmark called The Good Witch, which I got to do scary music for, and it ran for 15 years. I've never had a show run for 15 years.
Wow. Is it The Good Witch? You say?
The Good Witch, yeah.
Yeah, I know that show. Yeah. My partner's watched it. Yeah.
It was
in the background. So you did. Oh wow! There we go.
I called it a show for aging people.
It's definitely it's definitely more of a it's not my cup of tea.
No, it was kind of a soap that had a kind of a theme about is she a witch or is she not?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the funny thing was that Steve said, look, the ratings for this show are the highest that Fox has ever had for a show in that time slot.
Mm-hmm.
And wow. He says they'll keep going. You watch. And we did. We we did 5 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Total of 4. I think is what they ended up labeling it as, because even the specials are thrown into certain seasons.
Right,
so
right.
Some people put the specials as a season 5, like it's its own thing.
Yeah,
but
that's funny. But we did. I just remember because I was doing 2 other series at the same time, and they all went up into that 75 to 77 episodes, and I thought, this is unbelievable. I'd only started in long form and really in at the end of '89, and it just exploded in Canada because Canada was doing so much work, and because it was inexpensive to work here, and the Americans got tax credits. So
Yeah.
they got a third of the budget paid for. So
Well, hey,
obviously for television executives, it was like the golden goose, right? Right. So that helped us a lot. Put a lot of Canadians to work.
Yep. No, those all.
I just think of
Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark? Bunch of shows in the 90s, live action were done Canadian.
Yeah.
So really helped.
There's much of it now. Like,
created a lot of work.
Yeah. So much Goosebumps music out there now too. Like there's just a lot of Goosebumps music. Like there's a lot of random YouTubers that have made like their own Goosebumps song. There's even a Goosebumps musical. You've probably heard of. There's the Goosebumps the musical now. One of our good friends made a Goosebumps rap song on YouTube.
Oh, fantastic!
Called Goosebumpin'. So I got to plug that.
You didn't have.
There's a lot out there.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
I actually wanted to ask you really quick. Did you ever have I guess this is technically two questions. What was it like getting to work with some of the other people who worked on the show? And follow up, did you ever get to meet the man himself, R.L. Stine?
I did meet him actually at a party that they was like a rap party, and they had invited him. I think it was at the end of first season, and wow. He was a very, very quiet guy. It was interesting. I thought, excuse me, I've worked with a lot of writers over the years, and I have great admiration for them. The power of the pen is a great thing, and the power of language. And I've always been fascinated by language. My mother was an English teacher, and so she would read poems to us. I remember being 5 years old, and she was reading a poem called "The Hollow Man" by T.S. Eliot. And I remember asking her, and I know I was 5 because I hadn't started school. We didn't have kindergarten then. We didn't start till grade 1. And I remember asking her what a hollow man was. And she said, well, it's kind of like an analogy. And I said, what's an analogy? He said, it's the idea that, we think of men, or we think of people as being a substance, right? They're a, there's a structure, there's a framework. The Greeks called it the golden mean, where there's a direct relationship between the size of the head, the length of the arms, the length of the feet, length of the legs, size of the torso. And it was used as a standard in art and in all expression, because especially with the amount of sculpture that was done based on the human body, that there was a certain perfection to it, right? And so most of us have grown up with this idea that, and even part of the Judeo-Christian culture, that man was created in the image of God. And so we think of this idea of man being the human form. So it was really kind of interesting to me. I remember thinking about, so how could a person be hollow, right? Because that's not how you think of us. You think of us as being substance. And she said, no, it's about ideas. Of course, when you think about it, human beings don't really even gain a sense of abstraction until they're about 5 or 6. That's the earliest point at which you actually begin to think abstractly about things. So I remember her reading these poems and reading a lot of 19th century and 20th century poetry to us as kids. And I thought, I don't know why she did it. I guess maybe she felt that it would be a form of education for us. But it created in all my siblings are the same way. Lifelong readers, lifelong lovers of language, of expression, of poetic expression. And, you start to realize that we as human beings have this creative power, and it's the power of the pen. It's the power of imagination, and it's expressed, through history, through recorded history and through literary history as being poetry and prose and stories and all these things. And then you look at a character like Shakespeare, who had such a profound impact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even during his own life, with his plays. And he was said to have had a vocabulary of over 26,000 words. So, you know who have the greatest vocabularies now in our culture?
Who is that?
Right, lawyers.
Makes sense.
Lawyers read more than anybody, than any other profession, right?
Yep.
They have to understand the power of the word because they make contracts and all this kind of stuff. But the real power of the pen is creative writing. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think about it, those are the people who've had the most impact on us. As you know, if we read, if we're interested in ideas, if we're interested in beauty, culture, art, that's really the power. And so, just back to the idea of when you meet people like that, you sort of know that they're never going to be extroverts. They're never going to be people that are comfortable in their own skin.
Yeah, honestly, I totally agree with that. I mean, even, basically when you're in any medium of of art creation, I've met a lot of people who keep to themselves, and that's just because of that's how they work. So it makes a lot of sense. But in terms
silence is so important. Like, it's just like, I think about that kind of. Well, Paul McCartney had a great line about songwriting. He said, a songwriter, he says, don't tell people this. He says, but a songwriter has to have nothing else to do.
It's like, it only has to be one thing.
just one thing. And that's find the idea, ask the question. Hopefully, like the French, I don't know if you know this, but the French have written more about creativity than almost any other culture.
Wow.
So many French writers like Baudelaire, he said such an interesting thing. He said that art, that one of its purposes was to reveal the splendor situated beyond the tomb. And he said that art actually reveals worlds beyond this world, and in the imagination of the artist, that's. When you think about storytelling, and the Goosebumps stories are very structured in that way, there's always an inciting incident, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always something that happens that makes everybody wonder what's going to happen to that person.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of the basis of all good storytelling is what they call an inciting incident.
Yep.
And if you look at those stories, they were always based in a character that faced uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The characters always faced uncertainty. And so what did they do with uncertainty? What was their response to it, right?
Yeah. How did they interact? How did they move forward?
Yeah, how did they move forward through the story? How did they either win, or if they do lose, what did they win in losing? Because that's what's interesting about those stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I often think that music is sort of the same thing. Music tries to keep a tension between what's known and what's not known.
Definitely.
I think it was what was the guy who he was kind of Wagner's Nietzsche. Nietzsche said, "Without music, life would be a mistake."
Mm-hmm.
And you think about that in terms of how I shouldn't use the word attached, but how important it is for most people in terms of how it shapes them and how they respond to the world around them. And I think that a lot of those stories really, they rested on the idea that there wasn't going to be much resolution. It was always going to be kind of on the edge of your seat. Mm-hmm. And then hopefully there's some kind of resolution at the end, just so you don't leave people in complete uncertainty.
Well, that's the way that R.L. Stine did it, because the reason why the Goosebumps books were so, I mean, they were the first of their kind. Before R.L. Stine and Goosebumps came along, you basically kind of were mostly with like Stephen King. That was more like young adult horror. When Goosebumps came around, it was like the first time that someone was writing horror for actual like kids, like elementary to middle schoolers. Yeah. And it was done in a way where it did keep you on the edge of your seat. Basically, the way Stine would always do it is that he would hook you in because there would be like a twist or a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter, and then it would end with a big twist at the very end. Yeah. So you never felt like you were bored. Like no matter what, you were always like hooked in. We always tell the story about how when we would pick up a book, like we'd be like, okay, maybe like 1 or 2 chapters, but then you find yourself reading like 10 because you can't put it down. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm really curious. Did you guys read the books before you saw the show, or was the show your first experience with R.L. Stine?
It was sort of a mix for me. I read the books and watched the show at the same time. Sometimes I'd read them first before I saw the episode, just to compare.
Yeah, it was like that.
I'm the only one that grew up in the 90s out of this group. Right. So I was introduced to the books first.
Yeah.
So that was my introduction to it. But the 90s show, again, like many people, really boosted that for me because seeing what you read on a screen live is pretty awesome. When you're a kid, you're like,
I'm really curious, Nick, was it ever disappointing? Like was the show ever a disappointment in relationship to your experience with the book?
Not really, because honestly, like sometimes the books weren't as good as the episode. And I know we've talked about on this podcast before, so I apologize everybody who's watching this one, but it is a far cry to say like the Haunted Mask 2. The book wasn't great. It was okay. But what Billy and Dan did, the changes they made for that episode, leaps and bounds better than what the book was.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. Most of the time, a book will be better than what a live adaptation will be.
Yeah.
Harry Potter being one of those, in my opinion. The books were far superior to the movies, even though the movies were fun.
Yeah.
You just lose certain details and certain things that the book can elaborate more on or give you more of, where they're crunched down in a time frame for a 20-minute kid show. Yeah. So I understand as an adult now, but as a kid, I was disappointed sometimes. I'm like, oh, where was this, or what happened here? So there were instances like that, but I think Billy and Dan, the writers, did a very good job adapting a lot of episodes from books that weren't all that great to making them good episodes.
Yeah.
It was a couple of those.
Have you guys talked to those guys? Billy and Dan, have you ever?
So they haven't been on yet, but they're very busy. Like the only one I've talked to on a somewhat regular basis is Dan.
Right.
And we are trying to get him on here. But it's just, his timing is just not ever worked out. he is always busy or out of the country or on a project or.
Yeah. It's funny because I never met them, and we never met the writers because they didn't live in Canada. Right. I never met the writers. And then Dan called me after the series was over. It was, I think, several years after it was over, and said, it was fun working together. And I said, I guess.
we never did.
But I realized that it was really good. I always realized it was really good writing. Mm-hmm. But he wanted me to try to put the money together to do the Haunting series. What I think it was called
Haunting Hour.
Oh, Haunting Hour. Yeah, and we came pretty close. And then the financing fell apart, and then I was busy doing other shows, and then I heard that he actually got the funding to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
what was that experience like? Did you guys like that version?
So that was the one that I watched when I got into Goosebumps. So that was new at that time.
Okay.
And it's pretty similar to Goosebumps, but I actually think it was way scarier. Like surprisingly, like it actually pushed the boundaries even further than Goosebumps did, because a lot of episodes didn't have happy endings. They actually had very not happy endings.
Pretty dark.
But it was very good. It was a very good. It was sort of like a modern Goosebumps in a sense.
Yeah.
And there was a couple shows around that time. There was Goosebumps, and The Nightmare Room came out as well, and then Haunting Hour. Yeah, then The Haunting Hour. I think that's pretty much it. And then there's been Fear Street movies now though on Netflix. From Stein. One just got released actually. Prom Queen. I think that's it. Yeah.
Did you guys ever watch the one we were talking about earlier, Afraid of the Dark? Who's Afraid of the Dark?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are you Afraid of the Dark?
It's good. I love that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think it's really good. Like a lot of the episodes are scary, but I think season 4 and 5 holds the most scariest episodes.
Yeah.
Season 5 has like so many of the iconic creepy ones.
I had friends who worked on it, and in Canada, because it originated in Canada.
Yeah, it was terrifying. What season had Ghastly Grinner actually?
A lot of the actors and even directors, because Ron Oliver has done both. As a show. And it's funny, like when we talk to these actors, because they did both shows, most of them did both shows as well. Yeah. And we come to find out through a lot of these interviews, it's because the Canada pool is so small at the time, whereas now there's a plethora of just child actors, if they really wanted to get into the business. But back then it was a smaller pool. So it's like, oh, hey, I did Goosebumps. Why don't you come over and do Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yeah, okay. Yeah. It was just a swap of kids sometimes. So a lot of them did both shows.
Yeah, it's true.
Yep.
Yeah. Both starred Ryan Gosling. Both of them.
Yeah. Had some star power in it. It did.
Yeah. It's crazy to think that,
Yeah, it is.
How it went that way. There was a lot of famous stars actually in Are You Afraid of the Dark as well. I know Nev Campbell was even in an episode for Scream.
Nev Campbell was in it. You're right.
Yeah, there was a lot of stars in there. I loved it.
Yeah, this is a trip down memory lane, you guys.
Oh,
sure. Yeah, definitely.
I actually have a very quick question from one of our fans. They actually wanted to know, because you did the music for Don't Go to Sleep in season 3. They wanted to know if there was a full version of the That's Reality song that was like the rap that plays with the two men in black. Didn't happen to know, but I figured I would ask.
That's a very good question. I can find out. I think it was one of the few times we ever used a song.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll find out. That's a great question.
Because it was that and Money, I think, were the only two, and they were both both pretty humorous in their own way.
Yeah. Exactly.
What would you say was like your favorite overall episode to score for, if you can remember?
Oh, I have to say the library one.
Girl Cried Monster?
Cry Monster.
Yeah. Sometimes I don't remember the titles, but no, that's the one, because and I think probably it was because, when you're doing a first episode of anything, I at one point I had five full-time composers working with me, because we were doing 5 or 6 series a year. Plus we were creating children's series like Mr. Meaty and Nanaland, and we did 55 or 54 episodes of a show called Big and Small for BBC. They were all puppet shows, and so we were running a full puppet. We had an actual creature shop. A lot of those guys had worked with Ron Stefanik for years, but we had a full creature shop. We had probably 200 people working for us over 15 years, and so I had five full-time composers. One of them was my son Asher, who does all the music for what's that? It's terrible that I can't remember it. And you guys would know it. The Inspector Gadget.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
He does the music for that show. He also does. Probably about 10 different animated series. I'll remember them, but anyway. But I would always do what I would do is I'd write the theme and then I'd do the first episode and kind of set the tone for them. And it was really fun because I didn't have to do the slugging through 5 episodes.
Yeah. Just set the tone. And it was,
set the tone, write the theme, and then let the other guys actually do the hard work. Yeah. Because the hardest thing is to come up with new ideas every week. It really is challenging, and especially under pressure. Like you never have time for, as what I said earlier, for thinking what you might have, how you could make it better. There was never time.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
You always had to work from your first idea. It's still like that now. Now I get a movie in. I've got 6 weeks to write a 90-minute movie.
Wow.
And it's just nuts. Not only do you have to write it, but then you have to, we do it, most of them in the box, and then we hire an orchestra to add to the cues that we've written. We often do those in Europe because it's cheaper. But every time you do it, you realize that you have no time for thinking about, how could this be better? Right? It doesn't cross your mind. You simply
say that. It's actually the artists of the Goosebumps covers say the same thing. When we had them on here, we asked them the same question. If you could go back and change something, most of them will say, "Yeah, I would love to completely redo this one," or "I want to add a few things to the background," or "I want to do this." So I think that's just a thing of like a great artist who wants to be a perfectionist, but the thing is, art's never perfect. So you always want to build on it. You always want to change it. You always want to do something. So I think that's why it's not just artists who use a paintbrush or pencil. It's also
it's true with everything.
Side.
Yeah,
so, music is 70%, isn't it? Of like, I think that's what
it's we have this discussion all the time. It's so interesting that you say that because music budgets are seldom even 1% of the total budget of the show. That's
wow.
Yeah, but when you ask the producers who are determining that budget, and you say, just what do you think the music is like worth in terms of the percentage of impact for the viewer or viewer/listener? They'll never say below 25%. Some will say, oh, it's a companion. It's equal to the visuals. You can't, if you looked at it without any music, you would never have the same effect, right? So then when we say, and so what percentage of the budget is the music budget? It's never more than 1%. That's just the reality of it, right? It's just it's never been really acknowledged how important it is.
Yeah,
unless you're up in the Hans Zimmer kind of world, where you get 1.5 million. Yeah, you get 1.5
I guess if you're John Williams or Hans Zimmer.
John Williams, then you really get good budgets.
You get a lot more to go with it.
Yeah, but most of us are what I call journeymen, where you get very little time, you don't get a lot of money. You have to give up a certain amount of royalties to the producers and to various things. So you're lucky if you come away with owning 50% of it. And then what you try to do is, do the best job you can with the limited amount of time that you have. And you never really get to correct anything, right? It's like you were saying about the artists. You have to live with what you did and hope to God you were inspired.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because it's just an interesting world. It's a very quick turnaround. That's one of the reasons why when I think about the first episode we did, the
Girl That Cried Monster.
Yeah. Yep. The reason is they sort of saw it as a pilot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had almost 3 weeks to work on that one episode, which was never repeated, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be the scariest soundtrack, like from Goosebumps, I would say. Like, especially during the library scenes, like just when she's running through what looks like endless corridors of shelvings and books, like there's no way out, even though it wasn't far of a walk to the door to where he is, but they make it look like she's running for miles, and then the music. No,
it was a brilliant episode, both sonically and visually and sonically. And I really loved doing it because we had 3 weeks and because we got to experiment a lot with the idea of what I called dissonant harmony. Ultimately, you can create music that is dissonant, and it'll always work. Yeah. But you also have to have some kind of humanity in it, And when I say humanity, you have to have some kind of consonance in it, even though you might move in and out of consonance. Like sometimes it's dissonant, and sometimes it's a consonant, and it's the movement back and forth which creates the tension, resolution, non-resolution. It's a pretty simple kind of concept, but we really got to do that with that episode, and the whole idea of being able to use out of tune bells in combination with traditional instruments really was fun to do. I that was my most, other than writing the theme, that first episode was my most enjoyable.
Definitely.
I really remember working on it. I remember working on them all at some point. Haunted Mask was also really a pleasure to work on because it was a 1 hour. We had more time for some reason. I don't remember why. But we had more time, and whenever you have more time, it always becomes more enjoyable because you're not just thinking about a deadline. You actually get to think about the feeling of it, the content of it, how you can kind of make it jump off the screen.
Yeah. You can actually you nailed it. I absolutely love the whole soundtrack to Goosebumps, but especially the Haunted Mask. I mean, there's just you get everything from the feeling of Carly Beth's theme, getting you in different feels there, but then you also got like Trick or Treat. It's a little more fun but scary at the same time. And then you got the prologue, and there's just a lot of really great music in that one episode. I mean, I know it's a two-parter, but altogether one episode. So it was really great, and I'm not surprised they used that episode for the very first episode of Goosebumps. We learned though that Girl Cried Monster, I think, was supposed to be the first one. That's the first one they shot. Yeah, it was. But ended up saving it. And
they both had the prologue too. They both started.
I was going to say, I think both had that same prologue in it. So I mean, clearly there was a connection there when nobody saw until we started doing this podcast. Yeah, we were like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Interesting. So that's amazing.
It's been nearly 30 years since the Goosebumps TV show first premiered, and it's become quite a cult classic. Of course, we've mentioned that the theme song has become super popular, just as popular as the show, maybe even transcending it. But looking back, has there ever been anybody who's come to you about possibly reusing music or the Goosebumps theme song? I know we mentioned the Enjoy the Ride, but before the show, you had mentioned that the people behind the movie tried to use the theme song.
Yeah, they call. We had several conversations about it because they really wanted to use it, and I said, guys, it's fine with me, but you've got to get Scholastic to let you do it. And I don't know what they're going to want to charge because, we'd had a few of those discussions, which we thought in the past, which it didn't seem to make any sense that they wouldn't promote it, that they wouldn't let it out there and use it for things that people asked, right? Mm-hmm. But it was just weird because they really wanted to use it for the very first one, especially, and then I don't think they ever asked again because it was. I'm sure it wasn't much of a fun conversation for them.
Probably not.
Yeah,
I've heard that quite a bit from people who've tried to get Goosebumps licensing through Scholastic.
Right,
they're very stingy people.
They really shut people down in a hurry without even trying to get a PowerPoint presentation from them or something, something to pitch, like nothing.
Yeah.
Like you could doesn't matter. Like I don't know what it is, but
it's one of the main things
it's
that people
really
complained
strange.
about. It was like, where's the theme song? Why is it not in the movie? That was one of the main things people were crying.
Now, don't get me wrong. I think because it was Danny Elfman who did the score for the movie, and obviously I love Danny Elfman, many do, and I thought he did a great job. But that movie was missing that '90s Jack Lenz.
Yeah,
it was. And one example, the biggest example of that is just listen to Slappy's theme in the movie, listen to Slappy's theme in the original '90s show. Which one is better? Okay, and I'm pretty sure your version is.
I think so. You know, I've experienced this before too. Sometimes there's just a certain magic in the first time you do something. Mm-hmm. You know, and the theme had that quality because it was such a fun visual and really kind of a pretty inspiring visual. The way that they did that, and it was inspiring to write to. And I think most of the episodes were pretty inspiring to write to because there was generally I think that the writers. Dan and Billy, I think that they really captured it, right? And they really captured it in a way that was compelling for anybody watching. I don't think it was just for kids. I think parents could watch that with their kids and get a lot of it because there were subtleties in the writing. There were subtleties and maybe not all of it was up at the standard of some of the better episodes, but considering the timing, considering how long we had to very, very short time period for turning around both the visuals and music and sound, I really thought it was a great experience. And sometimes when you do things for the first time, excuse me, I think there's a magic in that, and sometimes it's hard to recreate, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people go back to stuff and try to
model kind of moment.
Yeah, it has its own moment, its own. And I think that's what made it unique. And it also, I did a documentary recently about. I'm not finished it yet, but I think I'll finish it probably this year. I wanted to try to explore and interview a bunch of songwriters about what makes music endure. Why does some music last, and why does some music not last? Mm-hmm. Right? And it's a very interesting subject because it's so subjective, right? We all have our own views about why we love music and how it affects us and what we remember and what our emotional memories are connected to pieces of music that we really love. But this idea, and it really struck me as a kid playing. I remember playing Bach for the first time and learning preludes and fugues and playing through them and just marveling at how complex and dense they were. And Bach himself could improvise in 8 voices. Like he could improvise 8 separate lines at a time with 2 hands. Like he's just a genius beyond what we could think of as genius. Mm-hmm. And, Beethoven, Mozart, same sort of genius quality that existed for a moment in that person through that vehicle, right? And I think about that a lot, and I remember as a kid wondering how music could last that long. Like you're playing something that was written 300 years ago. Mm-hmm. How often do we have that experience in our own lives? We have it through literature and through music, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. Especially in a culture like Canada, it was born in 1867, the States 1776. We're talking about 200, 300 years, and we might have a connection with that history depending on where we're from, or like Australia, this is a similar kind of experience. Canada, a similar experience. But there's certain things which can endure through literally hundreds of years and be the same have a very similar kind of impact 300 years later on the person either experiencing the music or playing the music. And that's such an interesting question to me, is what makes something do that. And I think it applies to Goosebumps because, there's a reason why so many of its fans are still its fans so many years later, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
That's why we are. And that's the thing. It all goes back to what we talked earlier about nostalgia, is that people who grew up with these books and this show succinctly are going to come back to this show because, of the many factors of how it made them feel when they were younger, the stories that it told, and certainly, the music that they heard. And I mean, I see people who do like covers and remixes of the theme song now because they love it so much.
Yeah. I get a great kick out of those too.
Yeah, I remember I saw
even our intro that's done by VALAINA, a band,
is a cover.
Did a cover of that theme song for us. So
yeah, that's neat.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty transcending, I think. And
we hold it near and dear to our heart too.
yeah, exactly.
But we owe it all to you on that front. And again, I mean, music is a big part, especially of a film and TV. So. It's just as much a cog as any other directing, writing, acting in any form of film or media.
Yeah. I mean, when you think again of any show or movie, most of the time, the first thing you'll connect with, if I said Jaws, I mean, it's like a 2-note hit, and it's amazing, and it just intensifies.
Yeah.
But you know what it is?
Brilliant.
And it's no different than any other horror movie. I mean, if I said Nightmare on Elm Street, you really can hear that.
Yeah.
Dun, 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 or Friday the 13th. I mean, it's just one of those things, like music really honestly connects more with people's minds.
Makes the world go round.
Imagery or anything else. And it's just one of those things that will click really, really fast.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Goosebumps, continues to evolve as a brand, but people still go back to those original shows and those books. And, that's all you can ask. And, when you get attached to a brand like that, and especially we always talk to people who are like, wow, I did not think that this was going to take off when I was working on it, but by God, it did. It's still going strong.
Yeah. No, it's very enduring. It's interesting. I have a few things in my life that have done that. And it's always kind of a miracle to me, because you think it's when you're in it, when you're in it, and I'm sure you've experienced this, when you're in it, it's very hard to see what it might mean down the road.
Yep.
Yeah.
And how it affects different generations.
Absolutely. And then it will continue to affect generations going forward. So it's all you can ask for as a creator.
Yeah, but, that's for sure.
That is going to do it for tonight's episode of Goosebumps Crew. Jack, thank you so much for joining us and talking some Goosebumps. It was an absolute pleasure on our part.
This was really fun. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
Thank Isaiah and Nick and Bjorn. I really, one of the things that I thought about when I took a little break, and I said to my wife, because we were putting Mercy to bed, she said, well, how long can you talk about Goosebumps? And I said, for a long time.
For a long time. I'm not kidding when we say we can do this for hours. Our audience knows at home. And we're always happy to talk.
We've been doing it for about 1.5 years now. So
good for you. Well, no, really, truly good for you guys, because it means a lot to people who worked on it creatively to see the level of engagement and kind of interest and also brings back great memories for all of us, I think, who worked on it. I'm so glad you talked to Cal. I didn't know you talked to him. That's really delightful, because he's one of my favorites. And I hope you get Dan and Billy to come on, because
said the same thing about you too when we talked to him. So.
Yep. It goes both ways. And we'll definitely talk to Dan and Billy sometime. We hope to talk to many more people who have been involved with the TV show, because it's a very big part of
we're still working on
ourselves.
Forte, Steve Levitan. We're still working on some of the actors too. I mean, there's a lot of people to talk about behind the scenes, in front of the camera. Just because Goosebumps never got that kind of behind the scenes documentary style.
That's true.
Like a lot of shows and movies do. So we're only finding out about these stories now, through people like you who we can talk to and
Sure.
Tell us these things.
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day. Most shows that I work on or have worked on over the years, I call them whirlwinds. They come very quickly, like a bit like a tornado.
Come and go, yeah.
Absolutely tear everything in your life upside down trying to meet the deadlines. And then when they're gone, it's very quiet.
Yeah. You're just like, what just happened?
Yeah, what was that? Yeah.
No, and we will continue to do our part as fans to continue to shed some light.
Yeah,
and if
I
you ever want to
appreciate
talk
that very much.
Goosebumps, again, our theoretical door is always open.
Okay, well, that's fantastic.
But is there any place that are any projects that you want to promote on your end?
Well, that's very nice of you to ask. I was going to say that we've had a resurgence of a show called Nanoland.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get a chance to look, there was a song that went viral that I wrote, again, 1998, I think it was, not too long after Goosebumps, when we did Nanoland. And it was the first puppet show that we'd ever done where Nickelodeon actually bought the first 100 shorts that we did. And I'd worked with them before, but never made anything that they actually played. And then we went on from that to do Mr. Meaty with them. But with Nanoland, what happened about a year and a half ago is some girl made a meme video of this song called "Who's That Wonderful Girl?" And if you look it up on YouTube, it's Nana singing this song to her granddaughter Mona, and Mona's dressed up as a princess. and the dog is dressed up as Russell is dressed up as a medieval suitor. It's pretty funny. So you can check out Nanalan, Nanalan. It's really great puppetry. It's very creative. It's funny. It reaches people young and old. Mm-hmm. And even though the show was never released in the United States beyond the shorts, we went on to do 40 half hours, right? Mm-hmm. Over several years for CBC. Those episodes were never shown in the US. They were never shown in the UK. And now almost 80% of our audience is in the US and the UK for this show.
Wow.
And we're up over 1 million subscribers. And we really are trying to get back into production. We think we're going to make some new episodes 25 years later, which is crazy.
That's awesome.
That's actually gross. Yeah.
Make a comeback.
So a little shout out to Nanaland on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook.
And I'll go ahead and leave links to those in the description below, so you guys can go check it out. Definitely check it out. I've actually seen some of it before, and it's very entertaining. So enjoy yourselves, and just to support Mr. Lenz and all the incredible people working over there. I'll leave links to those in the description below. So thank you, Jack, so much, and we hope to have you back on in the future.
Yeah, I hope to get to see you guys again. It's been really fun. I appreciate your time.
Of course. And of course, for you all at home, make sure, as always, you follow Bjorn and Nick at Goosebumps, Ossifan, and Shaolin, respectively. If you like today's episode, make sure you leave a like and comment, follow us on our audio platforms, subscribe to our YouTube and our social medias. All those links are in the description below, so check them out. We'll have another episode for you next week. But until then, this has been the Goosebumps Crew Podcast, and from all of us here, I want to wish you, as always, to take care, stay safe, and have a very scary day.